All right. Well, thank you for joining me and covering the topic of virtual early intervention and home visits and what that looks like on an online platform during the time of COVID. And I'm excited for the three of you to join me. We have Sharon, Niti, and Kathy. And I'm going to open up just a short time for the three of you to introduce yourself briefly. And so you can say your name, role, anything else you want to share. And I'll go ahead and start with Kathy. Right.
Okay, I'm Cathy Coggins. I'm one of the program coordinators at Life Steps Foundation, Children and Family Services, and we provide early intervention in the San Francisco Bay Area and San Mateo, San Francisco, Alameda, and Contra Costa counties. We have staff who work one-on-one with families, and also we have full inclusion infant development programs. And I'm also do in-home visits. Right now I do them virtually with families, and also one of our full inclusion programs.
Thank you. And Sharon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Sharon Priven. Um, we all work for the same agency, and I serve families in the East Bay, primarily in West Contra Costa County, and also in Alameda County. And I do some of the program coordination as well. And I came to this field from the field of social work.
Awesome. Thank you. And Niti, can you please share about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Niti Sharma, and I also work with Sharon and Kathy. My background is in physical therapy, and currently I work as an early interventionist and infant development specialist with Life Steps. I work in center-based program in homes, which are virtual right now, and I run a program, Me and Mommy, virtually.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, again, I'm so excited to have the three of you here and for us to learn from your expertise and experience and knowledge. And as I mentioned, my students are specifically interested in early intervention in the time of COVID right now. And one question that we came up with as a class is how have early interventionists adopted since the pandemic? And then a follow-up question with that is how do you support families right now virtually?
Mhm. Yeah, so I was going to take the lead on that question, but Sharon and Niti, feel free to add anything else. Last March, when the pandemic started and the shelter in place was put into effect, we all had to go to providing virtual services, whether it was one-to-one home-based or our infant development programs. And so we felt really fortunate to have support through national organizations like the Division for Early Childhood, which is part of the Council for Exceptional Children, and also ECTA, and then state organizations like CPE Online and IDA to help guide us because none of us had done virtual services before. Unlike some therapists had done telehealth, and nationally, some agencies had been doing virtual home visits even before the pandemic to serve families who were hard to reach, like a lot of rural families, underserved communities. But it wasn't the norm in our field. And so everybody was trying to learn how best to provide services. So I would say the first month was a lot of people trying to figure it out, trying to think about what was best for families, how will we support our staff, and also how are we going to make this work? So there was a lot of, I don't see how this will work with infants and toddlers. And we had to reframe the way that we look at early intervention and really focus on how could we best support the parent-child interactions and relationships, which we all know from research, that's the key foundation for the work we do. So we had to do a lot of training on coaching and on how to provide coaching virtually, and also, give each other a lot of support and compassion, and share ideas. And we're fortunate to be at an agency that allowed us to meet. We increased our reflective groups from bi-monthly, so meeting every other month, to meeting every other week. And that was one of the keys, I think, with our agency, to be able to really provide a high quality service and make that shift for our staff from doing in-home work and in-person work to doing virtual work. So I think that another thing that we appreciated was that regional center became more flexible about what they considered specialized instruction. And so there were allowances made to provide materials, like emailing resources and dropping off supplies at families' houses and things like that. That was not considered billable before. It was, we had to do our one-to-one FaceTime was what was billable. So I think, as a community, everybody came together and realized that this was a new way of providing services and that we had to be more flexible and adapt. I think, as you asked, how do we support families virtually? So some of the things we did was making sure to check in with them, not just about what their child was doing, but about how their family was doing, and seeing if there were additional resources that they need. And we always do that to a certain extent, but I think it became even more important during this time when a lot of families were experiencing multiple stressors. I think another way that we support families is really doing coaching. And so I think we all were trying to incorporate that into our practice, but having this artificial barrier of a screen and not being there in person really forced us to do coaching. I think, as most people could imagine, you can't keep a 2-year-old engaged on the screen, or a 18-month-old or a 6-month-old. So that was a shift that we had to think about for ourselves, and then also help families think about. But really embracing coaching and embracing the parents' pivotal role in providing the service is one change that I see in how we provide services virtually. And then also, I think it's really important to form collaborative partnerships with the families, but also with the other providers. And this did establish a way that it was easier to do joint visits together with PTs, OTs, speech therapists, case managers, and also incorporate interpreters more easily into the sessions. So I think one of the keys with virtual is to be flexible and to really listen carefully to parents as far as what they're telling you they need and what would be most supportive and what their priorities are, and then go from there. Once we got over the initial shock, I would say that it's gone remarkably well, and that I know people, Niti and Sharon are going to talk more about the successes we've had, but I appreciate our staff entering all this with an open mind and with a attitude of how can we make this work to best support families and children. And like I said, we've been really pleased. We also are doing a virtual infant development program that includes circle times, and then we do weekly lesson plans that are individualized for each child, and what we call weekly virtual field trips, which provide safe ways to think about going outside and providing outdoor experiences for the children to address their individual goals. And then also with that, they get individual services too, one-on-one services. So that's how we adapted the group to the virtual.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all that. I'm sure, yeah, there's just so much that has happened over the last year, and I'm sure we could talk for hours about all the specific details within all those ways that you've adapted. But I appreciate you sharing all of that and how you specifically support families. And the next question gets into a bit about how you adapted, and I know Sharon, you were uh, going to focus on it. And I'm curious, as Cathy mentioned, you all created virtual visits, and I'm curious. My students are curious about how those virtual visits work and what do they look like? How long are they? And anything else you want to share
Sure.
about that? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Cathy. Yeah, as Cathy's talking, I'm just remembering kind of all that we went through starting at the beginning to adapt. And what, kind of a shock it was for everybody. And I'm so grateful that we did have the support of the regional centers in being flexible, so that we could figure it out and offer anything that we could to families. Families were, you know, um, in shock and juggling having their kids home and trying to figure out how to work and have kids home, and then how to have kids in school and make all these appointments for their little one happen online. And did they have enough devices? Did they know how to work the technology? And at the same time, on our end, we were trying to figure out, well, what platform provides enough confidentiality and is in line with HIPAA? And what do we need certain paperwork to do it differently? And so it was a huge learning curve for everyone. Just to answer a little bit about nuts and bolts, I mean, we chose Zoom because we found it to be in compliance with HIPAA and we're comfortable with that. And we created a new consent form for parents to sign to be able to receive services virtually. And at the beginning, we did have, I don't know that anyone's doing this now, but we would have like a little practice session with families just to make sure everybody could get the technology right before we kind of really launched into our work. But I think everyone, became pretty skilled enough at Zoom pretty quickly. And I think it's interesting to reflect back on those times and remember, how stressed everyone on both sides of the camera was, and just how important it was that we did provide each other more support, and remembering that feeling that we would ride the same emotional waves of the pandemic along with the families we saw. We'd hear families sounding really burnt out, and we'd realize, I feel kind of burnt out as well after X number of months. And it really was this sense of like, we're all in this together. The sessions, just like when we're in person, are still up to an hour each time. Certainly, again, we had to be flexible. Sometimes with babies, an hour is too long anyway, whether you're in person or not. That baby needs to sleep, or the parent needs to sleep, or whatever. And sometimes a parent needed to get off because their kid needed the device for school, or they had a work meeting. So again, We were flexible about timing. Like in-person sessions, they can take place in different locations. We've had sessions in the house, in the yard, sessions at a relative's house if the family had gone to spend time with grandma and grandpa. And I recently had a session in another country, which was really awesome because I got to meet the extended family there. There was one other setting I was forgetting about, but I will underline what Cathy said also about that I've had many more sessions with other providers than I have ever done. I've worked with vision specialists and OTs and PTs and speech therapists, and I've really learned a lot, and I think it's been really valuable to collaborate.
Yeah.
And then what the sessions look like, I can't say enough how much flexibility is the name of that game, because the sessions can look like a phone call. The sessions can look like, a Zoom call. Or it could be, like Cathy said, sometimes it's, what we're offering families is dropping off materials and then following up with a phone call or email. Especially at the beginning. And you have to remember that there were the families that we continued to see that we had met in person. And then we began to see new families that we'd never met. And so that was like a whole nother learning thing.
Yeah.
But over time, we started to settle more, I think, into our routine of this. Everyone, calmed down because we kind of were getting on a roll. And then, the sessions might look like, it might look like you working one-on-one with the child. It might look like you observing the child or observing the child and the parent and then discussing that with the parent. It might look like you sharing your screen and looking at a video of the child or a resource with a parent. I've filled out applications for childcare with parents by Zoom. I've had sessions with multiple providers, and I've had sessions by Zoom where my camera was off because it was a child who we were just starting sessions and we needed not to startle her or overwhelm her with a new person. So there's really a lot of room for creativity depending on what the family needs and what will help them feel most supported. I agree with Cathy that it's really been an opportunity to kind of hone our coaching skills and, really kind of walk the walk of that idea that the parent's the most important teacher. Yeah. And that what's most important is what happens in the however many other hours there are in the week than the 1 hour we're there. And to really redefine what we see as a successful session so that we are looking for the parent to feel like because they've learned something new or received a certain kind of support, they can offer that to their child and they can see their child making progress, especially under these circumstances. What a great feeling for a parent to feel effective and empowered. And in that sense, we get that pleasure as well. It's a whole feedback loop. But it's, I feel that it's much more important for the parent to see what that parent can do rather than the parent can see what I can do with their child. So those are some things. Let me see, check my little note card. Yeah, I think I would pass off to Neeti, and if anyone has other things they want to jump in and say about what a virtual visit looks like, go for it.
Yeah. I would just emphasize one thing that it doesn't look like is the parent sitting the child at a desk or table and like wanting us to talk to them or read. Occasionally we'll read a book or something, but not for an hour. It's not them doing what we are telling them to do or something. That's not what it looks like. And I would also say that what I've noticed a lot more is parents welcoming me into their daily routines. And I think there's something about physically not being in their house that makes it easier for some people to bring us along. The other day, a little one was hungry, so the mom just said, "Okay, let's go make lunch," and picked up the laptop and carried it with her. And like I got to see them making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and all the rich language they were using and just all this stuff that I know they wouldn't have done that as easily if I was there, because I think when we're there, parents tend to think that they need to use that time with us to work on more play and pre-academic skills. And I just don't think it's as easy for them to make that shift. So I think that's one thing I've noticed is being incorporated into more like meal times and more just daily routines than I've been in person.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. Needy, did you want to share anything else about that second or first question?
No, I think Sharon and Kathy has beautifully covered it. So, like, I was thinking and reflecting on that journey we had. Like, it's been almost a year.
I know.
What a journey we had, right?
Right. And I know even just taking this time to reflect, I know for me, of course, like I haven't been working as an early interventionist with Life Steps Foundation. But just taking a step back, even for me right now, thinking about the past year as a parent, there's so much to it and so many different chapters. And like Sharon was saying, the waves. And I can only imagine how many layers and chapters and how much is just you could share. So I appreciate everything you're sharing. And yeah, I could talk to you all for hours about this. I'm so curious.
I
But
did
it's
have one more difference. Sorry.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the other difference is that in general, when we were doing in person, families had already decided that that's what they wanted. And with the virtual, I would say a lot of our families would entered saying they would prefer in person, but since that wasn't available, they would give it a try. And so there did have to be a shift in how we discuss the value of our services with families. And I think Sharon had some more thoughts about just how to set the stage with parents about our services.
I can say that. I wasn't sure. I knew you had talked about, services in general in an earlier conversation, so I just didn't want to, overlap too much. Yeah, I mean, I think that everything flows from how you frame your role and from the first session so that parents know what to expect. And this has been another opportunity again to kind of sharpen that so it's clear that our role is to support the parent in the whole family, but to support the parent in supporting their child. And so and that we are there as in a general role to look at the overall development of their child, kind of like a primary care physician, and then and make referrals or collaborate with them on interventions as needed. But it's really it's just really been an opportunity to emphasize that we're there to collaborate with them, that we really want to hear what their concerns are about their child and their family, and that's going to be our starting point, and that we want to see how they're working with their child, and know what they've tried and what's working and what's not before we jump in and start offering information. Was there something more you wanted to say about that, Kathy?
No, I just think that was a big difference. And I think that that it shows the power of this way of working, that parents have stuck with it and they've actually enjoyed it and feel like successful. And even though they didn't enter it wanting to do it this way. And I've even had experiences now that things are starting to reopen where parents are starting to get some of their therapies in person, but they're actually preferring the virtual sessions more than the in-person sessions, like in a clinic setting, and they're finding it more valuable to have us, like, to have people understand what they do at home and what they have available at home and how they can use what they have at home instead of having some specialized setting where they can't duplicate that at home. So that was just an unanticipated thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. I'm almost hearing that virtual early intervention has helped to make the visits more focused, and I don't know if that's the right word, or more centered on that family centered approach and the routine based approach. Whereas before it was a little bit more messy, and there was a lot to handle in those in person visits. Which is so interesting. And I know we're about to get into the benefits, and maybe that it's sounding like it's a benefit. And I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's really helpful for my students to hear that. I think sometimes COVID's been so hard. So we have that negativity mindset, of course, during such a stressful time. And I think a lot of times people are thinking, I hear a lot of um, conversation with my students that there's been a lot of challenges, which there has been. But I think it's also important to talk about some of those benefits and how that can shape the field going forward. And perhaps that's something we can learn from and use in the future. Uh,
And it's been helpful as we've experienced it to be able to convey our confidence to the families that we can provide services
yeah.
this way, and that families are finding it really helpful and beneficial. And
That's
I
a really
think
good
when
point.
Sharon talks about framing it for parents, it's like our attitude towards it is conveyed to the parents. And I think as we got more confident and positive about it, we also more easily conveyed that to the parents, and they also took that on. So,
That's a really good point. And I could only imagine how supportive it would be just to have that hour of having somebody to talk to somebody as a parent during that time, especially during those first couple months too. Uh, so yeah, so interesting. Niti, I think that transitions nicely to you. Uh, and the question that my class and I developed was, what are the benefits of doing visits virtually? And then what are the challenges? And of course, I can open it up afterwards for Sharon or Cathy to expand on anything that you are about to share.
Yeah, I think Kathy and Sharon has kind of gave an overview and kind of a journey we had it. But I think thinking about myself, there were two major changes happened, and I thought that was a benefit I carried providing virtual services, was like I was thinking out of box. I was like thinking about all other ways to support families rather than just visiting their home and doing some goal oriented tasks, because
Yeah.
it was like a performance for everybody, like parents, somebody's coming home and a child has to be ready by the time, so it was rushed. And as Kathy said, like now it just goes as a flow, and we are able to see a bigger picture of the family, what resources they have, what kind of home dynamic they have. Is it a single mom, or is it like a grandparents involved who are visiting, how we can involve everybody together. So the major shift was, for me, was building that positive relationship with the child and the parents, which was uh, for me earlier it was like I am the facilitator here, and I'm doing it. But now when it's done by parents, I have a role of like a fly on the wall, and I'm scanning those successes, the tiny, tiny celebration that we are able to convince parents that, okay, see, this is what happened, or this is what it was happening, right? So they are able to see those smaller celebration or successes around the child, which gave them confidence that it's the relationship which is helping them to learn from each other. Um, Another thing I would say is the shift of um, the parents being participating in it, like, the coaching model that we were providing and the flexibility of sessions, as Cathy said, they felt more empowered. And my personally, I feel the participation was more virtually than earlier. Maybe it's just the kids are not that sick often, or like, they are being home and there are less cancellations, they are ready. Though with some families we are more flexible depending on the family dynamic. For some families they are always ready, they are before us on the Zoom, right? For some places, yes, we needed there were some challenges also, right? The technology was the challenge itself, like learning the new technology for uh, understanding like what is important here. Like some parents would carry the laptop behind the child, some parent would sit on a table and make child sit on the table. So it was a relationship that grew, and we tried convincing like what is important here, how we are trying to model things here. But then they got better we got better about the technology. Another challenge was with babies, when they were little babies. So I had someone who was like 2 months, and I would really want to hold him, like I want to see him, right? But then they also did very well, and I could see how parents learned to do those things and surprises us. And the most surprising factor comes when they would say, oh, we tried this, and it was like amazing to see that they are learning about all this with their children, and how they are able to replicate that same thing, and they are getting innovative, they are getting empowered, and they feel confident. Another thing is, I feel there was another thing was the regulation part of it. Sometimes the challenge is like, being noisy or the things going around, it gets irregulated. But the relationship it has built and the confidence we have in last year has built help us to be, it's okay, that term of like, it's okay to be noisy at some time. It's okay that the session did not go well because of we are able to brainstorm or think about like what works with this individual child. Because now we are not really, I mean, overall, yes, we are working on through the goals, but we are also doing very smaller certain changes around house, which probably we were not able to see when we were in person, because it was a set sessions, like parents would have set the sessions expectations, but now it goes like random or like by flow. So certain things as Cathy said, like there were families I could never visit at lunchtime because I was in the center-based program, so I never know how feeding worked with this family. But now we have flexibility to see certain areas that probably kind of we missed or assumed earlier.
Right. Yeah, that was so interesting. Yeah, it's just so interesting to hear how switching to virtually has brought up so many different challenges, yet benefits. And so, yeah, I just appreciate you sharing all of this. Sharon or Cathy, do you want to share anything else about the challenges or the benefits over the last year during COVID?
I mean, I would just say that, doing the work live in person has one set of challenges and benefits, and also doing it virtually has its set of challenges. They're just different. And I'm sure different people feel, different interventionists just feel differently about how to be most effective. I know you know, I would throw out a couple other things I appreciate that while working virtually, I don't have to deal with so much driving and traffic. I do appreciate that. I
Yeah,
can
especially
see,
in the Bay Area.
exactly. I can see more clients if I want to, because I don't have that drive time. I don't have to ever feel concerned about safety issues that sometimes we have to think about in neighborhoods we go into, or issues about, putting aside COVID, even just exposure to other illnesses that might be in the home.
Yeah.
So those things, you know, are notable. And Cathy mentioned before, using the family's own things in the work. And I do think that, you know, it is so tempting, you know, for us to bring things. We go in person, and we've all been kind of on our team working on that over time. But, you know, parents will say, it's, you know, it's great when the child can do it with that thing in the PT's office or whatever, but I don't have that in my house. So again, it's another opportunity to practice, you know, noticing what's in the room that they might use in a certain way they hadn't thought of, or problem solving together, where you say to them, we're trying to do this. How could you imagine that we might do that? Is there something you could imagine using in a way that would help us with this? And let them come up with the idea. So just some other things that I would add there.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. So good. Yeah. Cathy, do you want to share anything else?
The other thing I would share, it's not directly related to home visits, but it impacts the quality of our visits, is that doing things virtually has allowed our team to connect more and to train each other more, because, as Sharon mentioned, not having to deal with the traffic stuff and the driving stuff. Our agency is throughout 4 counties in the Bay Area, so it's difficult for everybody to meet together.
Yeah.
And by doing the virtual meetings, we've gotten to know each other, use each other's skills, problem solve with each other, and form more connections. And I think that's been a side benefit of doing things virtually. And, you know, it's one thing that I hope we will be able to continue, because one thing with home visits is you become very isolated doing home visits. You're just there on your own, and nobody else really sees or knows what you're doing. We've been able to also work together. Niti and I did circle time together for a while, even though she's in San Mateo County and I'm in Contra Costa County. And we were able to serve a family from San Francisco, as well as families from Contra Costa County, which we wouldn't have been able to do previously. And also, Niti, when she mentioned starting the program, it's a mommy and me group for a virtual group. There's an infant group, a toddler group, and a preschooler group. And her and another one of our staff from the East Bay were able to do the groups together. And also families from as far away as Stockton were able to participate in the groups and benefit from them. And none of that would have happened before. And I think with infants, it is challenging, but I also know that parents don't have to worry about us bringing any germs into their house with their newborn babies. And I think one population that that can potentially benefit from this, or where there's less cancellations, is when the children do have more significant medical challenges and risks. And with those families, previously, if I had anything that felt like a cold, I couldn't go see those children, because the potential for them to be hospitalized was so significant. And so I would have to cancel, even if I knew it was allergies or thought it probably was allergies, I'd still have to cancel. And I don't have to do that when I'm seeing them virtually. So that was another unexpected benefit of doing things virtually. I would say the other challenge, there are some families that this does not work for. I will be honest. There are some families it just doesn't work for multiple reasons, including, significant stressors that some families are under right now. But some of those families it wasn't working for when we did it in person either. You would show up and there was no shows, or they would have late cancellations. So I can't say all of it is strictly because we're doing it virtually. But I will say that for some families, they're under a tremendous amount of stress right now. And because they're under a tremendous amount of stress, it's making it difficult for them to participate in early intervention services. So I would say that's a challenge, whether or not it's directly related to virtual or it's more related to the pandemic and the side effects of the pandemic. I can't, officially say. So, but I mean, I think overall we've been tremendously happy with how the virtual visits have gone, but we won't sugarcoat it and say that there aren't challenges also.
Yeah, I appreciate
to add to Cathy, one thing I realized that since we are doing virtually, we could connect certain set of our team member right to the certain set of the child being needed. Like, if someone needs certain more like a speech side, and we know our team member, one who has been kind of, really, or preschooler side, or who has been able teaching background, could connect to someone who really need that kind of skill set, or like, so your reach is gone to like Richmond or like places farther, because you are available here and your skill sets can help some certain children who need that kind of, not being in person, but you can't travel, but now you have an option to share those skill sets, or do a kind of talks to, as Cathy said, we started more meeting with the team and discussing kids, and have that flexibility to learn from each other more than just in our staff meeting once in a month. So I think there's a bonding between our team has increased. That's one of the benefit I would see. Like, we really feel close to each other, and it's like we were on the same boat and the same journey in last year. So
yeah, I'm sure it's really bonded you all, both professionally and personally. And yeah, I just appreciate everything you've shared with your experiences. And it sounds like, in a way, as far as the benefits, it's almost like virtual intervention has brought up these innovations in home visiting, and also just new opportunities that I don't think we had time to think about before COVID, but then it's almost like COVID has forced us to come across them. And I guess it's a big question, and I'm wondering your thoughts, but I'm wondering if you think in the future, and of course none of us can understand what post-COVID is going to be like, but do you think that the field of early intervention is going to adapt some of these virtual learning platforms for working with families and home visits? What are your thoughts? I know you mentioned, Cathy, at one point, I forget which platform you were mentioning, but you were saying it was really helpful and you hope in the future that it can be used. So just curious your thoughts about that. I know it's a big question, but I'm really curious, and I know my students are too.
I think for me, I hope that the option to do visits virtually continues. I think one of the challenges will be, especially as there's the option to do things in person, is how you discuss it with families and them seeing the benefits of it as compared to having somebody do something in person. I think that could be a challenge as far as getting referrals. But through CPE Online, there was a recent training where they talked about that, and it was a therapy agency that had started before COVID to do virtual to try to reach children in more rural areas. So they had started making the transition even before. They put together a lovely video that's parents' feedback on the progress they had virtually compared to what they had when their child was getting in-person speech therapy. And I think that if there are educational materials like that to help parents make an educated choice about which approach they would prefer, that would be really helpful. I think that, prior to COVID, there was a huge shortage of early interventionists, and families were having to wait. There weren't people to provide services. So if this allows more families to be seen, I think it's a benefit of allowing providers to provide the service in this way. Also, it really, in the Bay Area, it cuts down the travel time, and that saves a whole lot of time where you can actually be working with families instead of sitting in a car.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason I hope that, and it's not like to make it easier for me, it's to make it so that we can serve more families and children. So I think if we're looking at how do we best serve families and children, there's a shortage of early interventionists in this state. And we need to think about what's the most effective way to use the personnel that we have, and how can we best provide services. And I think this is one option that I hope they continue. And from what I'm hearing, the Department of Developmental Services is seriously considering keeping this as an option for the future. And I hope that really does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting. And it almost sounds like, in a way, it helps to cast that net wider on children and families.
And it is like Niti said, Niti is being modest, but as she mentioned at the beginning, her background is as a physical therapist. We're so fortunate to have someone on our team who really is talented at working with children with motor challenges and also significant medical challenges. And it doesn't, worry or scare her to work with these children and families. So having her available to see families who really need that specialized approach in different parts of the Bay Area has been one huge benefit of doing it this way. And so that's just another, I think, thing to think about, and when there's specialists like PTs, OTs, and speech therapists who are in short supply, it's also important to think about how can they serve the most number of clients and get their needs met. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah. I'm so happy you all mentioned that and really emphasized it. Yeah. Anybody else want to share? No. Okay. I feel like I could talk to the three of you for a much longer time, but I'm going to have to end our time. And I just appreciate you all sharing your experiences and with my class. I'm excited for my students to listen and learn from you. And just thank you so much for your time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
I just wanted to say, Kimberly, if any of your students are doing, virtual services or considering doing it, and they ever want to talk or problem solve with someone, we're always, willing to talk to students and open to answering their questions and thinking about it with them. So, or professionals or or combination student/professional. So yeah, you have our contact information, and I can't speak for Sharon and Niti, but I'm always happy. I think our team's always happy to talk with
Our team
people.
is always happy.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. I will be sure to pass that on to my students, and I know they're really hungry for information. So you probably will be hearing from some of them. But yeah, again, thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording unless there's anything else.
No, thank you for having us.
Okay, let me go ahead and